TNA fam, we're back at the Impact Zone podcast again to talk more TNA wrestling shows. Today I want to talk about why profit must be reinvested. Look, thing is, you can't just keep profiting. You can't just keep sitting there and saying, we're going to keep making a lot of money. That money has to go to somewhere. You have to have a plan to say, okay, cool, we're actually going to use this money. Because if you're just sitting there on money, well, that means little to nothing. If you're saying, we're going to, not reinvest. If we were saying, oh, now we're actually losing money. Yes, we're still making money, but we'll be making so much more money if we reinvested that money and said, okay, cool. Let's get better equipment. Let's get better trucks. Let's get more trucks. Let's, invest more. And, obviously we are talking mainly about wrestling and TNA here. But this applies to anything. You can't just sit on money. You have to use that money. You have to say, okay, cool. Where are we going to invest? How is this going to increase productivity? Or how is this going to be making us more competitive with our competitors or whatever else it is? Because like somebody was saying there, about how you shouldn't compare apples to oranges, WWE to AEW, or AEW to WWE, or TNA, or anything like that. It's going to happen anyway. And in the marketplace, if you're not saying, okay, how can we be better than our opponents? Well, you might as well just say, hey, we might as well sell up and go out of business. Because if you're just not saying, okay, how can we become the number 2 promotion? Then you might as well say, well, let's pack it up and go home, guys, because that's the only way business works. If you're more competitive in some way, in some form, in some fashion than what your competitor is. If you offer something different at a better price, a better experience, whatever, or you offer other things, or if it's more efficient, or if it's cheaper, or whatever else it is, or it's more environmentally friendly, or whatever else it is, or whatever, you've just got more of an international touring schedule, so you serve markets that they do not serve, or what have you. They might say, okay, well, we're going to serve England or the European continent and America, Northern America. Okay, cool. So now we know, hey, you're mostly focused on North America and maybe Europe. Okay, cool. So maybe some of Europe you're probably not going to go to, and you're probably not going to go there all the time. So let's go and invest our time and our energy in another area so that, we have a different pool of people to be working for and in front of. We can be just as big over in Europe or in Asia or maybe Australia or wherever else, maybe some of the more affluent countries, like you would only say, Northern America and Europe or whatever, maybe Australia, maybe Japan, South Korea, some of these sorts of places, whatever. Those sorts of things. Because they actually have, enough wealth and enough population where it's like, okay, those people are looking for something to spend their money on, let's give them wrestling to come and enjoy. Or even saying, hey, we're going to broadcast in those countries more. Or we're going to have more TV deals in those countries so that we are serving that market even if we're touring in the US or even if we're touring in Europe or wherever it is that we're touring. And say, hey, well, even if WWE comes over here or whatever to Europe where we are now, cool, well, we can just go somewhere else. We can always do something else. There's always somewhere else to go. Forward thinking. Again, you can't just sit on saying, well, WWE is in the best position. They're making all this money, but what are they doing with it? Not really doing anything with it. They're stuck because they're at the top. They don't really feel like they need to innovate. They're not really trying hard. They don't really care. That's why they're saying all this stuff about saying, hey, shut up about the bad creative, or shut up online about all this stuff or whatever else it is. And I get some of the saying, well, shut up because you don't really know what you're talking about sort of thing, to an extent. But again, fans can have their opinions on things. So don't tell them to shut up and whatnot. They are allowed to have their opinions, even if some of them are very stupid. There's a lot of opinions out there saying shit about TNA, and a lot of those people are freaking stupid. But I won't say that to everybody to say shut up. I'll just say it to the few individuals saying, hey, shut the fuck up. You don't know what you're talking about. Like, all these people are saying TNA isn't even in the top 10 promotions. What do you mean? Like, where is New Japan's TV deal then that's in the States or in South America or in Europe or anywhere? When are they touring? When is the NWA touring? Where are they touring? You know, how many views do they get? How many people do they get in their arenas? You can take literally any other company besides WWE and AEW and TNA and say, besides those three, any promotion, pick them and say, okay, show me their TV numbers. How many numbers are they getting on TV? How much money are they making? How many arenas are they selling out? How big of arenas are they selling out? Or whatever else it is. Any metric that you want to say. Who is bigger? WWE is the biggest. AEW is second biggest. TNA is probably third biggest. You know, I don't know whether you count AAA in this, because now, like, AAA is technically owned by WWE, though they operate sort of as their own entity in some ways. You could say, like, some of the Japan promotions combined are sort of, like, on their own level, but internationally, besides, like, in Japan, they're not really doing all that well. Like, the New Japan is not doing very well, and they're still not doing very well. They're way behind AEW. And same with Ring of Honor, which is not really its own promotion either. There's no other promotions that have a proper national in America and in, like, you know, Northern America, or even whatever. Because TNA does have a South American, Latin American broadcasting deal as well. And international broadcasting deals, you know, in Europe, in the UK, in all of this. None of these other things have that. New Japan doesn't even have a proper weekly TV show. There's only a few other promotions that have a proper weekly TV show that are 52 weeks out of the year. People say MLW is a really great promotion. Yeah, when it's on for 2 weeks or whatever else it is, when it's actually on for a month, cool, great. They did a good job. I'm not trying to degrade them or downgrade them or whatever. I'm trying to say this is how it is. If they're only working 1 month a year or 2 months a year or whatever else it is, that doesn't count, you know, because, you know, maybe if you did extrapolate it and say, oh, well, if they were working 52 weeks of the year, well, maybe they would be up there. But, you know, like, that's not how it is. So if they're not working 52 weeks of the year, or basically whatever, then I'm not going to count it. You know, they don't have a proper TV show weekly that's 52 weeks in the year. You know, even if you say, oh, well, you know, we have that yearly special, whatever, that's still part of the TV. You know, some of the TV isn't good. Well, it's there and it exists. And not everything can be the 5-star classic or whatever. But anyway, again, that's why you also need to reinvest, saying, hey, okay, cool. People have said they want this person because they can have 5-star matches, or they want this person because they're a really great character, or whatever else it is. They'll have a really good feud, and they'll have a really good promo, and they'll have really good this and that. That's why you've actually got to reinvest and say, okay, yes, it is, you know, best come, first serve sort of thing. Like, if we take all the talent from MLW or Ring of Honor or any of these other promotions that people are saying, oh, they're above TNA, well, suddenly they don't have all these talents and TNA has them. And then you're going, oh, okay, yes, they have more money. That is what we're saying about why they are the number 2. They have more money, they have more resources, they are just a bigger promotion overall. It's not whether they're strictly better talent or whatever. No, they've got the bigger budget, and they've got the bigger backing. So it's like, again, no, if you're thinking that they're not the number 3 promotion in the world or close to it, you know, you're out of your mind, you know, because they've reinvested. They've done that thing again where it's like, okay, we need a new TV deal because the old one is pretty bad. Maybe like back then, like a few months ago or whatever, you could say, oh, well, they're lagging way behind and there might be other promotions that are a bit better than them in terms of like TV numbers or whatever else. Yeah, sure, okay, cool. But still, like, they have the bigger money. So, and they're just a bigger platform in general. You know, there's not many other bigger platforms besides WWE and AEW. That's it. Like, even AEW has their B shows or C shows, you know. So, yes, it's certainly bigger than, like, Collision or whatever. I can't remember. It was Rampage before, was it? I don't know. Anyway, but again, a lot bigger than those shows, bro. So, again, somebody put it out there the other day, like, AEW's doing like 500K. I was like thinking it was like a little bit more than that, but like between something and 500K. And I thought, oh, that's way less than I thought, you know. And they said, oh, it's like TNA, the network that they're on, or the upcoming network that they're on, they could potentially get like close to that. They could get in the 300,000. Like in the first episode, I expect them to get over 500K. You know, or close to it. So if they can keep in that 300K range, and it, you know, we know this deal is roughly 3 years or whatever else it is. So yeah, if they can do really well for the next 3 years or even sooner, if somebody sees, you know, them exploding out of the gates and doing really well, you know, again, they're going to be like, oh shit, they're doing really well. And they're going to have to reinvest and say, okay, let's give you some more money, because every time we've given you more money and more ability to go out there and showcase, hey, we can do this, that they do it. And again, people say, oh, they've done a shit job. Yeah, they've done a very good job of selling these tickets with a very limited, you know, exposure on a potato network, you know, which is something people don't want to talk about. They don't want to be like, oh, you know, they don't want to put two and two together. They're always saying, oh, they're on a potato network where two people and a dog watch them. Yeah, and, you know, they just about sold out a 10K arena there a couple of months ago. And another one there a couple of months back before that. So how did they sell out those? And you could say, oh, yes, it was WWE. How many WWE guys were on that show, on those shows? Basically none, you know. Only a couple, you know. Trick Williams, that was it, you know, basically. That was the main event of Slammiversary, sure. What was Bound for Glory? It was oh, and yeah, Bound for Glory, same thing. But still, you know, not a major name. One of the young NXT call-ups. And most of that stuff that was happening there on TNA to build to that was, hey, you know, a basic, simple story. That's why people bought in. You know, people bought in because, you know, they saw Mike Santana and they really liked him. He had a great story and they wanted him to succeed. And they wanted to see it happen. You know, there were other stuff going on, like the Hardys having the Dudley's last match and whatever else and all this other stuff. There was that hype around, you know, WWE being involved. I think that hype has died down a whole lot since then, you know. So I don't think people are as interested in the WWE crossover part because that's kind of died down, but the numbers have stayed fairly high up. So again, they've been reinvesting everything, or not everything, but they have been reinvesting everything that they had into getting better and doing better numbers, into doing something better. And yes, you say again, like the last few years, they haven't made a profit or they're in debt, all this money. They just got a $30 million deal, though. And yes, maybe that won't cover their debt or whatever else it was. Do you know how much WWE is in debt despite having all of that profit? Quite a lot. So again, it's not like, you know, that will stop anyone or anything. Especially if you're saying, well, we're going to reinvest for the future. You know, again, you can't just sit down and say, right, well, we're comfortable. especially when you're the number 2 or number 3 or even number 4, whatever it is. I don't care whether you think that they're number 2 or number 3 or number 4. Wherever they're at, they're there. And if they're going to shoot up and say, okay, cool, we're going to take on AEW in our way as best as what we can. And then if we're above AEW and they don't fight back or whatever else it is, hey, well, we're going to take on WWE after that. You know, like, that's where you've got to be if you're not the number 1 promotion. Unless you're the number 1 promotion, you cannot sit around, or company or whatever else it is, you cannot sit around on your haunches and say, okay, cool, well, we've done it now and we're at the top. Once you get to the top, you're WWE and you're have to be going, okay, cool, we have to fight everyone off. We have to fight AEW off. We have to fight TNA off. We have to fight anyone else off, you know, that we can. But at the same time, we've got to keep delivering. We've got to keep reinvesting. We've got to keep the ball rolling. That's the problem with what they're doing. They're not doing those things, and they're just saying profit, 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 profit. They're putting up the prices of the tickets. They're charging more and more and more for all these events and whatnot. And it's like, cool, but that hasn't translated to anything. They haven't, yes, they've brought in superstars here and there, and they've done some things here and there. But again, realistically, they could have brought all those people in with the money that they had. So it really hasn't changed anything in terms of their reinvestment. Plus, again, they've released a whole bunch of people and plan to release even more people, I think. So, again, the amount of money that they'll have will be basically effectively the same, or the amount of, you know, output that they have will be effectively the same, but they're just going to sit on their haunches and say, okay, cool, we don't really care. We're just going to keep scooting by and whatever. We don't really care. We're not going to reinvest. We're not going to try harder. We're just going to be here and we're just going to collect the money and that's it. We don't really care, you know. So that's, you know, their complacency, you know. They're not trying anymore and they don't really care. They're just like ticking the boxes to make sure that they're keeping the ball rolling, so to speak, which I don't think that they should be doing, but that's up to them, not up to me in a sense. So I don't really enjoy it, and that's why I don't really want TNA to be involved with WWE. Many of the reasons why I don't want them to be involved with WWE, but again, because TNA, they've got to fight. If they're ever going to do anything, first they've got to try to take down AEW, and if AEW fights back, which I hope they do, I'm not just sitting here to cheerlead for TNA or whatever. I'm here to cheerlead for all wrestling. At the end of the day, I want wrestling to be this thing that people are like, holy crap, the industry is absolutely on fire. You can watch any of these promotions and they're all vying for effectively the number 1 slot. Maybe AEW is a little bit less good, or maybe they don't quite have as much money, or whatever it is as WWE, and TNA is there too, and maybe they don't quite have as much as AEW, but they're all just as good as one another, and you could pick any one of them and not have to be like, oh man, I've got to watch this shit, or whatever else it is, or somebody's going to tell you, why are you watching that shit, mate? You know, whatever. No, it's like, oh yeah, cool, you know, AEW's got this person and got that person, and last week they had this really cool thing in Wembley or whatever it was, you know, like they did do all those cool things too, like again. So you can't take anything away from them. I'm not trying to take anything away from them. I'm just saying, if you're thinking about where we're at, okay, cool, we're beneath AEW, definitely, and we're definitely beneath WWE. Okay, cool. So we've got to reinvest our money and saying, okay, how do we get more sponsorships? How do we get more bigger arenas? How do we get more big superstars? How do we make our business better, so that we're, you know, closer and closer and closer to that? You know, we've got to climb that ladder and try to be number 1, you know, and AEW's got to do the same thing. You know, that's why I've said 1,000 times, like, if AEW start seeing TNA on the rise, which I think they will, they might have to pull their hand out of their butt and say, okay, cool, TNA's on the rise, cool, quick, let's get everything firing as good as what we can get it. No more, this and that or whatever else, or let's cut things as quickly as possible if we make a mistake, or the fans aren't liking something or whatever else it is. And I mean not really liking it, not just being like, oh, this is heel heat and people, not like this heel or whatever it is, but they'll pay to see it because it's like drawing them in or whatever. That's different if it's like, oh yes, they're paying to see it because they want to see this other babyface or whatever else it is. They're wanting to see this story paid off eventually, some point down the road. So again, that's what we're going to have to build towards. Fans are the ultimate decider in this, not some, suited person in a boardroom somewhere or something. That's what WWE is doing. They're just, saying, hey, look, we're doing the best what we can for our shareholders, and that's all we really care about. Not really the person and the people and the families and whatnot that are coming to our events. We're charging them outside the nose just to come to our events, just to enjoy a bit of wrestling once a week or twice a week or maybe 3 times a week or maybe whatever it is, And, that's all we care about. You can't just care about that. If you care about just bottom numbers and bottom dollars, and not like that's where they're at because they're at number 1, but like realistically they shouldn't just care about that. They should be like same thing. They should be thinking, oh shit, AEW is on the rise. They should be thinking, right, well, how do we make our product better? How do we keep in the lead? How do we perhaps reduce the prices, or give more for the prices, or whatever else it is. That sort of thing. They should be saying, how do we serve our audience more, not how do we impress some suits in the boardroom or whatever. They should be saying, okay, how do we serve these people on the streets like they used to do? Same thing. That's why, that is why, though these other promotions are able to get their feet on the ground and able to do something and try to compete for that slot, because WWE isn't pulling their finger out and saying, yeah, well, we will care about the average people and the working families or whatever else it is. And I said this before, eventually people are going to just be like, okay, WWE, I can't afford to come to your event, even if it's in my hometown, because you're charging too much for tickets. I cannot afford it. I will watch the program on TV but that's it. I cannot afford any more than just to watch it on TV because you're too pricey for what you're asking. And I understand, again, I've said this a few times, that it's also the arenas being like, give us more money, so they've got to put their prices up sometimes. But we can see that that's not the case in this case, because WWE have made all that profit in the last couple of years, where it's like, oh, okay, cool, great. They don't really care. They're obviously in the market of just being like profit, which is like leading them down the path of like, not being as good or anything as competitive. So if they keep sitting on their haunches, either they're going to get taken over by somebody, or they're going to have to get off their ass and say, okay, no, AEW or TNA or whoever, or the combined forces of both of them is coming together and too much. Look out, right? We've got to start pulling our finger out and do better and find a way to appeal back to those people that we alienated before, And that's how you get people. Again, you've got to appeal to that mass audience. That's the problem that I think AEW has had. They've had an identity crisis in some ways of like, we're trying to be the ultimate sport thing, where all this, we're not WWE, but we're going to bring in people from WWE. So we don't really know what we're doing, and we're not going to have silly stuff, but we've got to have silly stuff, or whatever else it is. It's like Danhausen. Technically, that's really silly. Like, if you stop to think about it, or whatever. Anything can be really silly if you stop to think about it. But I think wrestling is a variety show. You know, you shouldn't say, oh, we're not going to do this or we're not going to do that. We're going to be basically pure sport. Good on you. Good luck to you. You know, that's what Ring of Honor's done for like 2 decades or whatever else it is. If you don't have more of a pomp and circumstances presentation, then you're just basic Ring of Honor 2.0. And basically they were just Ring of Honor 2.0 because basically they just bought out all of Ring of Honor's talent and New Japan's talent. You know, 2 of the biggest, you know, like this is a serious sport companies in the world. And then like a few years later, they bought Ring of Honor when they were struggling and whatnot. So they've kneecapped Ring of Honor twice, like really. And then they're like still kneecapping New Japan at every turn because they're like, and if they could, they'd be, and they have done this, they've been kneecapping TNA for many years. And TNA is just giving the same thing back to them by saying, hey, we're going to sign any talent that you let out that we want. Same for WWE in some ways. I know they're more like, we don't really care or whatever. We're just keeping the ball rolling or whatever. So we don't really care. But still, I feel like they've got to maintain certain things to keep that ball rolling. But yeah. Anyway, guys. Yeah, you cannot keep going, especially if you're in a lower position with just like jacking prices up. You need to be saying, what is that providing? Why are we doing that? Or what are we giving to offset that? We're not just saying we're going to increase the prices or whatever just so we can hoard money. No, we are going to use that money, because otherwise it's useless, to reinvest. We're going to do something, we're going to bring it along, and it's going to, you know, say, okay, cool, we're going to sign this agreement with this sponsor and with that sponsor. And with those sponsorships, we're going to say, okay, cool, now we're going to balance the ticket prices because now we've got this deal and now we have more money. So now we can say, okay, fans, thank you so much for, you know, sticking with us. We finally got a new sponsor or whatever it was and whatnot. So now we can finally stop charging you so much for tickets. Or we can give you something else for, you know, coming to the arena and buying it or whatever, you know. Or buying it on pay-per-view. Or buying it on the TNA Plus or AMC Plus or whatever else it is. So yeah, there's always something that you can say, okay, cool. WWE has Snickers and WWE has this, or AEW has this and they have that. I don't know who they've got. So, okay, cool. We can't have any of those, but we have to find some other big time sponsors so that we can be, you know, bringing the prices down. We can still be making the money, but we can be bringing the prices down. And that way we'll make more money because more people will be able to afford it more easily. So that is a way to reinvest, like, some of that money, and sometimes it takes time, and sometimes it's, well, we've got to get a little money to get more money or whatever else it is. When you're in WWE's position, you ain't need more money for nothing, man. So, you know, but yeah, it is what it is. So anyway, guys, I hope you have enjoyed this one. I know some of you understand all this, but it's fun to go through and discuss. So hope you have enjoyed, and hope join me again in another one.